Howdy, folks. This is the Hockey Buzzcast. It is Thursday, April 16th. Russ Cohen is here as always, and we are joined by Peter Harling, who does some draft info for Dauber prospects. We've been wanting to get Peter on for a while to talk about the upcoming 2020 draft. Of course, we don't know exactly when that draft is going to happen, but still that, we're still interested in how things are going to go down. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, fellas.
Peter, I wanted to start with this. Now, obviously with the pandemic and everything being shut down since the middle of March, NHL teams have had to adjust to the fact that, they're not going to be scouting at the World Championships, and sometimes top players for the upcoming draft play in the World Championships. There is no under 18s. There isn't going to be a draft combine. There's likely not going to be a draft combine even if the draft is held in September after the restart of a regular season. How do you think NHL teams are going to adjust to that? Do you think they're going to get more conservative in terms of their approach to the draft and not take what they would maybe consider, what other people would consider a risk, since they didn't have the ability to scout these players more and interview them?
Well, I think one advantage is it should eliminate all of the recency bias that might exist, because there will be none of that.
I don't know. I think there still is.
Yeah, maybe. The one thing that I can speak to about that is everyone's in the same boat, right? Like all the teams have had the exact same opportunities to go to games and watch live, and I know that they don't do more or less at the beginning or the end of the season. Of course, the U18s carry some weight to them, and playoffs in the league playoffs and tournaments, Frozen Four and Memorial Cup, all that is extremely relevant. How players raise their game or not under the pressure of those contents is a significant factor to take into account. But it's not like this is the first year any of these kids have ever played hockey. They've played in tournaments and championships before, U17s and whatnot. So there'll be a little bit more video scouting for the second half, watching tape. In terms of the combine, there was a couple of combines at Top Prospects games, so scouts got some information and some stats from that. I think maybe one of the more interesting things will be with the fallout of the combine is the interviews. I don't know how much weight NHL teams put on the interviews, but I'm pretty sure that they could still provide some sort of online interview process that's maybe facilitated by the league so that they can monitor the conversations with the draft eligible prospects. I know Arizona got into some hot water earlier in the year for
they're still in it. They haven't been decided yet. Yeah.
So
I can tell you is this: I spoke to a lot of players this year, Peter. A lot of players have already spoken to teams way before the pause. So the teams do like the final interview, though, because it is like your final job interview, and they like to sort of read the room with other people in there and see how he is under pressure. A Skype call is not going to give you that same read. That's the only thing.
Yeah, and I would say that the interviews have the same sort of impact as a tournament, right? Like, you have a bad World Junior, it's a blemish, but I don't think it should really affect your draft status ranking.
And there's been a few that have had such bad interviews that they have dropped.
Well, Brian Burke just talked about one.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. That was actually pretty funny.
Unlike, and I'll give NHL general managers credit. I mean, Pierre Dorian came out, I think it was in 31 Thoughts from Elliot Friedman, where he said, I'm ready for the 2020 draft. Bring it on. I'm ready to go. And, that's, I mean, for Ottawa, them having their own pick and San Jose's pick, he's got a heavy investment in this upcoming draft. But
I can tell you honestly why Pierre is that confident. Because he goes on the road himself,
right?
And he goes to a lot of places. I run into Pierre quite often, and so he definitely gets out there. So I could see why he would have the confidence.
But I give NHL general managers a lot of credit because I don't hear a lot of them pissing and moaning like NFL general managers.
No, they're the worst, the NFL ones.
Yeah. So
I feel worse for the OHL and CHL teams that forfeited prospects and draft picks to load up for a playoff run. And the NHL teams still have a chance that they have a playoff. So jury's still out on that. But the CHL teams, they spent those draft picks. They're gone, and they didn't even play one game in the playoffs. That's pretty unfortunate.
It's unkind to everybody. All right, so let's talk about some prospects. The guy who led the OHL in scoring, Marco Rossi. We'll talk about him. We've seen him. I'm sure you've seen him more than I have, but I've seen some good footage of him live and otherwise. I really do like him. I will tell you that he's probably not going to move any further up on my rankings than he is at 8. I know some people have him further up, and it's not really anything that Rossi doesn't do, and it has nothing to do with his height. I just think that, and I love the way he can score goals, and he has a greasy side and even a dirty side. I've seen some dirty hits from him. All that's going to help him along the way. I just don't think he'll be this kind of scorer at the NHL level. I think he'll be a really good one. I think he's probably a 75-point guy. I don't think he's a 90-point guy. Now, we'll see how that sort of progresses, but I think right now he's an exciting guy to watch and definitely seems to be he's pretty split, in his goals and his playmaking ability. I think that's something that really bodes well for him.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with anything that you said there. 2 things about him that I really like. One, I think he's one of the more NHL-ready prospects in the draft. So there'd be some teams that maybe that's the difference maker. Certainly, it should be in fantasy hockey, which you might know I'm big in. So there's that, and when I watch him live, you watch the highlights of him score, and those are all real fine and impressive plays that he makes, and he's got great vision and hands and shot and all that.
Yeah.
But when you go and you watch him live, you have the opportunity to see how hard he works away from the puck. And that's one of the other things that I really like about him. Like, he is impressive enough to be a first-round pick when he doesn't even have possession of the puck.
Yeah.
And then when he gets it, you're like, oh, man, this kid's legit. I have him 5th on my list for what that's worth.
Yeah, no, and I think 5 is a good number. I think if we're within anywhere of 5 of each other, I think that's really the barometer. The thing that I wonder about Rossi is I notice he scores a lot of goals seemingly from 5 feet out, a little bit more from the goal mouth, either side. That's going to be harder to do at the next level. Not saying he can't, because he's gonna, but that's where I think he's going to have to become a little stronger, and it's going to be that ice is not going to be as easy to find.
Sure, absolutely. And he's not going to be a 100-point player in the NHL.
No.
He's not even going to be a 100-point player in the AHL
right.
if he plays there ever. But yeah, no, I think he's, if you use a top 10 pick on a guy that scores 60 points in his career seasons,
fine by me.
Yeah, man, that's good money.
Yep. You get 200 games out of him, 60 points. You can't argue. Now, the one that may surprise you or may not, I have Perfetti at 4. Couple reasons. One, he's a center, but he's a real, true, natural center. I was able to track at one point this season, he was 58% on faceoffs. Now, these are the things that are least talked about him. When I did get a chance to interview him at length, and that's up on Sportsology, I had an exclusive with him. He was a very bright kid. Like, he, in 9th grade, scored high in the country high in North America for math. And I don't remember the exact score, but it was tremendously high. And I looked at it and said, wow, that's impressive. And he goes, yeah, he's sort of embarrassed about it. But he is a guy that when we started talking about math, and this is where, everybody just sort of looks at hockey players or athletes just as jocks, but a lot of them are really smart. And he is applying that on the ice with the angles that he shoots at and everything. And he believes that he does see openings that other players can't see. And he thinks that is part of it. That's why the way his mind works that way. He was 2nd in scoring. And it's funny, Peter, because I don't think people talk about him like he was 2nd in scoring. I think they look at him and say, yeah, he's really good. He's got a great shot. He's fast. We know he's good 2-way. But I don't think they put it all together. The reason I have him at 4 is because I put it all together and I say, okay, he's going to take a few years, but this is a good package, a really well-rounded, and he's a natural center.
I have him at 4 also, coincidentally. What I really like about him is how much his game evolved and changed from this season to last season. I mean, he went into this season dubbed as Goal Perfetti. You know,
Right.
he's one of the best goal scorers in the 2020 draft, one of the best shooters, and he still is, right? And he didn't get crappy at shooting, but the rest of his game really evolved, right? Like he's like, okay, I'm good at shooting. Absolutely. All around his game has changed. And then when I saw him live in Ottawa, you know, Saginaw and Ottawa are two basically all-star teams in the OHL, and he was dominant. Like, he was a standout in that game. He just controls the play. And when I watch him on TV as well, he's one of those players that just is a man amongst boys.
So actually, that math score was top 25% in the world.
Holy smokes!
Wow.
Yeah. So
close to me then.
Yeah, close to you. The other thing about him, Peter, is he said he worked on all those things over the summer. That's clearly true. His clutch scoring ability, like if people watch the video, at least from the Holinka from 1920, he was a one-man team there for a bit.
Yeah. He can carry the momentum of a game. It's really impressive at what he can do at times. He controls the game, and that's a special attribute to have. I'm not sure how confident I am that is going to transcend as well as it does in junior and to pro hockey. Mm-hmm. That's really hard to gauge, and I'm not a professional scout. I just like to watch a lot of hockey, but I think it bodes well for him.
Yeah, no question. Now, Jamie Drysdale is one of my favorite guys in this draft. I was lucky enough to see him live. I did get a one-on-one with him after the game, which, again, I know there's people that always say, what can you how important is what you get after a game from a player and whatever. I'll tell you how important it is, because they just got off the ice being very competitive, right? And all their juices are flowing, and you get a really pumped up answer compared to what you might get a lot of times if I'm calling someone at their house and it's, an hour after dinner. It's a completely different mindset. Now, some guys can jump back into it pretty quickly, but he is a guy that, boy, I got to tell you, competitive wise, amazing. And he's on his own island in this draft. I have him ranked third. He's on his own island as far as a defenseman. Like, he's the only one that I think is a top pairing defenseman. I know Jake Sanderson has shot up the charts, but I saw the bad Jake Sanderson and then the great one at the end of the season. And that's where I was saying about recency bias. I think him and Jack Quinn are a really good example of recency bias. Not that they're not good players. They're really good players, but I think it started to pick up momentum for those guys before the pause. And so I look at it and I say, in regards to Drysdale, skating, hockey IQ, his first pass is just great. 5-on-5 or power play. The thing that I found interesting about him is he doesn't care if he's a target when he's on the ice. I specifically asked him that, knowing that how talented he is, teams are going to game plan against him. He loves it. And he likes playing 5-on-5 as much as the power play. And you don't get a lot of guys saying that, especially defensemen. And I thought, this guy's wired a little differently.
I never had a chance to interview him. I'm not really good at interviewing. Maybe you can help me with that in the future.
Sure, yeah.
But from watching him play, I watched the Team Canada World Junior Selection games that they played against University of something.
Yeah.
And there was a hot competition for the Canadian roster to make the defense. And he went in as a pretty significant underdog, being a -2 age player, right, for the World Juniors. Mm-hmm. And, man, against some, like, the best competition that Canada has to offer, he really proved he deserved to be there. And then, like, not only did he just prove enough to make the team and, maybe be, like, the guy that doesn't get dressed for the tournament, but gets to go and gets the experience of what it's like. No, he played.
And he got better as it went along, I felt.
Yeah. And he produced, and he didn't look out of place. He looked confident, and he contributed. And that's really impressive.
The thing about Drysdale that intrigues me is he's playing for, I'd say, a mediocre Erie team in the OHL, and he scored a point per game, And as you were saying, Peter, he started off as the 7th defenseman for Team Canada, and his role grew as the tournament went on. So what I'm always curious about is, he's the number 1 defenseman in this draft class, and we always have teams that will draft for need instead of best player available, but we don't know how far that will go. I mean, there are teams at the top of this draft, and we have to wait until the lottery happens, but teams like LA and Detroit that desperately need defensemen, and will they, like, if they have the number 2 or 3 pick, take a guy like Drysdale over a guy like Quentin Byfield?
I can't speak to what NHL teams will do and how much positional bias over best player available, but I had Craig Button on the Dauber Prospects podcast last week, and I asked him about that. I said, did teams not just pick the best player available and then use asset management going forward to take care of their organizational needs? And he argued with me that the asset management starts at the draft and that you do take that into consideration. So I guess basically you have to look at what is your organizational need, what are your options at that pick? So let's say they got 3rd overall, and the choices are Stützle, Raymond, or Drysdale. If they've got really deep depth at center, then I wouldn't be surprised if they go ahead and take Drysdale, because the next step down after that is a pretty significant one. I mean, Sanderson closed the gap a little bit, and there's some other
a little, but
not few that are relevant, but no one that can have like a top pairing impact. It's pretty much Drysdale, and then
you know what's funny? I think Poirier would if there was a better all-around game. So I think down the road we might be looking at Poirier, whoever gets him, and say, wow, this guy is so good offensively, and he is, but he's got to round out his game. So right now he can't be in that combo.
Sure. There's like I said, there's a lot of other players, but they all have a little bit of something there that's still not quite in focus yet, whereas Drysdale is.
And I'm not a Gooley fan. I don't even have him in the 1st round. I think he's a 2nd rounder for me.
Yeah.
Hey, Peter. Thanks for joining us. I'm so sorry that I'm late, guys. I had a family issue here with my son for a bit. But,
thanks for having me.
No, it's so nice to have you on here. And I don't know if this was asked, but it's just a thrill to have you on. I don't know if this was asked or not, but so if it was, I apologize. But I know, hanging out with Russ and all these years and stuff like that, you always hear, around this time, this is where we kind of expect the guy to go, but there's still, this could happen or that could happen. With everything ending in March and then nothing happening from March on, basically probably until they're drafted, we're not going to see these guys play again, right? So, do you think that makes this year different?
Yeah, for sure it does. We talked about that right off the hop.
Okay, cool.
Basically, all the teams were in the same boat, though, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Missing out on tournaments and playoffs is unfortunate, but they've been in other tournaments and they've been in other playoffs. So if the scouts have done their homework, then they already have a pretty good idea.
If you were a scout that was like putting off the seeing a guy, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's weather. Sometimes a guy gets sick. Like, there's definitely times. I'll bring up like Hendrix Leperrier because he got injured. Maybe there's some other times you'd like to have seen him. But I think I've seen guys with their books and everything else, and they'll go back, I think, and look hard on last year and other tournaments from last year, and maybe more than they normally would because they won't get a new viewing of them in that situation. And I think that'll help weigh it.
That makes sense. The other question I have, which is kind of maybe a stupid question, but I know a lot of people.
There's no stupid questions.
Well, it probably is, Russ. I'm going to throw it out there. And I'm going to lead launch with that because
if you can manage it,
question, I'll be okay. No, but a lot of people ask me this all the time, and I really don't have a good answer because I'm not a prospects guy like you guys are. But okay, so if you're a scout, and obviously these scouts are reporting to the GM and all this, and everything's happening constantly, and then the scouts are doing a ton of work. How do you think a scout feels if, like, say the draft's about to happen and suddenly his draft pick is traded away? Like the guys, suddenly they've decided, they're at a trade deadline or whatever, and the 1st round draft pick goes for some rental, and this one guy's been scouting this one guy who he knows is only going to be in the 1st round. Have you run into people who've like complained about that situation, or?
No, not really.
Yeah, I could
answer some guys, and it's a job, right? They get paid, and they get paid regardless if the player that they like gets picked or not. they get a little bit emotionally invested in some of these players, and they become a little bit of fandom, I suppose. But
I'm sure
you really got to take that bias out of it if you're a professional. Like we're talking NHL scouts, not fantasy hockey scouts. And just because they trade their draft pick away doesn't mean that they don't circle back on that player down the road via trade or free agency.
Right. I can tell you that they always back the GM because they know it's a business, and I've spoken to guys about this, but there's a little part of them that, feels like the plug gets pulled and it's like, there's definitely, they're never going to say it publicly, but they're human, and that definitely happens. But I will say that a lot of times these guys really rise to the occasion. Like when you come into a draft, like Gordy Clark went into the draft with his first pick of the draft was in the 3rd round.
Right.
And, and when you're starting off a draft that way, it's a whole different ball game, man, because, you're sitting on your hands for the whole first day, and then you're waiting through the whole second round of the second day. Yeah. So, guys,
I know the scouts become obviously more important when you get into the later rounds. That's where they probably do more. And they probably have more like special things they've been hiding, like that they know about. Because the first couple rounds, everybody kind of knows about most of those players, obviously, or all those players.
The one thing about scouts is they're very down to earth, even if they're the best scout you've ever met, as far as knowing talent, getting great first round picks, but once in a while they do get passionate. And the best example of that is when I interviewed Krista Rockstrom for the 100 Range of Greats book about Lundqvist. He wanted Lundqvist from the 2nd round on.
Yeah.
He knew he wasn't going to get him in the first, even though in his mind he was. Yeah. So, but from the 2nd round on, he was arguing for him, and he still didn't get his way until the 7th round. And remember, they picked another goalie ahead of him in that draft.
Right.
A guy named Brandon Snee from RPI that only Joe Yerdon has ever seen play and nobody else on earth. And that's because he called the game. And so, when you get into that situation, that's when you realize, sometimes, like another example from another sport is in 2000, that's the only NFL draft I ever went to. And the Jets drafted Chad Pennington, really good quarterback. Ended up having an arm issue. And so his throwing was a little hampered, but very smart, very successful. But there was an old timer that Parcells brought with him that was from the Giants days, from New England to the Jets. And he was a quarterback guy. And he talked about Tom Brady, and the Jets didn't do anything about it. And see, that's where a lot of times, these guys really do know, but sometimes the guy at the top gets swayed by somebody else's argument.
See, it's funny because it was probably a conversation that Russ was involved in at one of the recent drafts that I was just asking or just listening to them talk. But when a team trades draft picks, and the scouting staff has worked relatively hard to determine like a list of players, it is like giving up a chance at the plate. If you're talking about baseball, it's like that player or that pick is an opportunity to find somebody or that they really like. And if you trade picks away, then you're decreasing the number of opportunities that they have to pick a player that could make a difference.
And then you're a guy like say Rutherford in Pittsburgh, who trades away his first round pick almost every year. You look at that, must be that kind of thing. I think would weigh on you eventually. If you're like, okay,
they're not giving away picks though. You're trading them, so you're getting something. You're getting something, right? And if you're trading them in advance of the draft, it's a shot at the Stanley Cup. So hopefully, you got a little ring on your finger that is pretty good compensation for not having a pick in the first round.
That definitely helps.
Or at least extended playoff revenue from the tickets.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Now, Peter, over the last few drafts, it's always tough to look forward and say, okay, these guys are going to make the NHL at age 18, but usually it's the top 2 or 3 picks that will like in 2016, Matthews came in as a rookie, Laine came in as a rookie, and there were probably 1 or 2 others at most that did. It seems to me that everybody thinks that Lafreniere is probably going to step into the NHL wherever he is, unless the team is loaded it forward in his first year. Do you think Byfield is somebody that could step into the NHL at 18 years old, or is he somebody that needs a little more seasoning?
I think anybody could step into the NHL. I think Byfield development would be best served going back to Sudbury. Absolutely. I don't have much question about that. I hope he doesn't go first overall because there seems to be this
Oh yeah, if they go first,
egregious rule that the first overall pick must play in the NHL.
Yeah.
That didn't work out super well for a couple of guys. And I think Byfield would fall into the same category. I think he's got tremendous upside. I'm a big fan of him. If you wanted to rank him first overall in this draft based on his career long-term potential, I wouldn't have an argument with that. I think Lafreniere is, to your point, the number one ranked guy because it's pretty safe to say that he has the most upside long-term career-wise as well. I mean, you flip a coin between the two of them maybe. But I think Lafreniere could step in and produce in the NHL right now. And I talked about this on my last podcast with Craig Button as well. And he says that the NHL isn't a developmental league. And there's lots of players that go from the draft in the NHL. And what do they do there? Like Kirby Dach last year, he played in the NHL.
Yeah, that was a waste. I was against that the whole year.
Right, exactly. So I think Byfield fits into that category as well. Could he play in the NHL? Yeah, he's big enough. He's fast enough. He's physically mature enough. He could play in the NHL and not get destroyed. Right. But his development would, I don't think, be benefited by it.
I think the good example with Byfield, Peter, was we all went to go see him live, a bunch of us, and so we were going from like the top prospects game to, I think we went to London when Sudbury played in London. And so, we watched a couple games in a row and they weren't his best games. I saw that, I saw the speed that he has and like that extra gear that he has and play, away from the puck and all these other things. But he did go on a little bit of a dip. And then, sure enough, like a game or two later, he has a 4-point game. And I think that's where you make a good argument that, you know what? Let him have another season in the OHL so he's a little more consistent with these big games because that's not enough domination for me just yet.
I feel this year that you saw with like a guy like Joel Farabee with the Flyers.
I would have sent him back.
Who was spent a little and what from my perspective, it feels as if sure Farabee could stay and probably be a good third line player for the rest of his career in the NHL. But if you send him back, he becomes a first line player. He's
not supposed to be a third line defensive guy. That's the role they put him in this year, and he's holding his own. But he's not supposed to be
that for his rest of his career. But that's not his upside, right? So that's not where And I think that's what it feels like to me. Like it feels like they lose that they lose like a level from a first line to a second line.
That's where, if you remember, Eck, that's where fans got the wrong idea about Sean Couturier because Laviolette rushed him into that defensive role, and for a couple of years he was their best defensive forward, and then everybody's like, well, Sean Couturier doesn't score, and then once he got strong enough, all of a sudden Sean Couturier not only scored but became a dominant player at times. But they all remembered what he did at the beginning, and that really wasn't Sean Couturier. That was a guy filling a role.
Well, the way I look at it is, it's like say if LA or Ottawa or Detroit have the number 2 overall pick and they take Byfield, more than likely he is going back to the OHL because it's not those teams are not at a point where they're going to contend or even on an upward track. And like the Kings have Turcotte and oh God, who was the other top center that got hurt?
Trevor Zegras?
No. For the Kings, the one that got hurt. Gabe Vilardi, thank you. And Detroit is not going to contend next year, and Ottawa's got a bunch of prospects. Whereas a team like Montreal, we've already seen, Peter, they rushed Kotkaniemi as a 3rd overall pick, and I don't know whether they ruined him or not, but he came in his sophomore year. He had to go back to the AHL because he was not playing well in the NHL, and that's the risk that these teams take. You send an 18-year-old to the NHL when they're not ready, and you could potentially ruin them after 1 or 2 years.
Before they play in the NHL, they should dominate at whatever level they're in. And I don't feel like Quinton Byfield has dominated the OHL. He's been dominant for Sudbury, but he hasn't dominated that league.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like to see him do that next year.
We're going to go
many cases of guys who've stayed too long, like in the OHL. Like that's a hard thing to find. Like, okay, he had a bad NHL career because he stayed too long in the OHL.
So we're going to go 2 more players, and it's not necessarily a sleeper, but just a guy who you feel like will surprise people after the draft. Who's your guy?
Well, I'll stick to what I know really well, and Zayd Wisdom plays for my hometown team here at Kingston Frontenacs, and he's been a riser on the draft charts this year. He's played his way from kind of off of the radar entirely to potentially as high as the 3rd round. I've seen him ranked in the 70s. So a lot of people might look at his stat line and then look at the Kingston Frontenacs and say, well, he's playing with Shane Wright. He's just riding shotgun with that guy. But watching the games play, he is not dependent on Shane Wright scoring on his passes or passing to him for tap-ins. He's a controlling force in the play. And in his rookie season,
Shane Wright is the kid who got exceptional status, right?
Yep, and he's what Connor McDavid did.
I know that. Yeah.
Connor McDavid got exceptional status when he was drafted in the OHL, and he set some records at that age. And Shane Wright, I'm not sure if he beat them, but I think he did. He was right on par, if not slightly ahead of what McDavid did at the same age. And I think you could argue that Erie was a better team than Kingston was this year. Although Kingston,
I watched that Erie team. I went up and saw them personally. They were good. They had Connor Brown. They had a bunch of players, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So, anyways, Wisdom. He's a puck hound. He's a Charlie Hustle kind of player. I gravitate towards those kind of players personally. I like that he has a really high work ethic. He treats the puck like it's his, and you better not try and touch it. The evolution of his game has been impressive. That was pretty much all he brought to the table in his rookie year, and his offensive production in his rookie year was pretty unimpressive. But this year, he's obviously put in a lot of work, and his things like pass reception ability is night and day from what it was last year, and his confidence in controlling and handling the puck is night and day as well. Like in his rookie year, it was like a hot potato, right? He'd get the puck, and then he'd look to move it. He could either just pick up or shoot or pass, even if it was a bad decision. And this year, he's quite comfortable holding the puck and even circling the wagons in the offensive zone around the net to the point or whatever, and just maintaining possession and working the cycle. He's not super big. He's 5'10", 200 pounds, but he plays a pretty aggressive game. And I guess by default, he drops the mitts and answers the bell when someone wants to ring it.
Yeah, you made me look at him, and I didn't have him on my radar because I don't really do a list beyond 50. And this year I'm only doing 31. Anyhow, I liked him. I liked him. I think he's got really good movement on both sides of the net. I don't think he has an elite shot yet, but I also think his two-step quickness needs some work.
Sure. Yeah, there's things to his game that need some work. But the way he's evolved his game and developed it in a season has been great. I mean, he went from being kind of dominant occasionally on a shift to having games this season where he's been dominant, and I'm looking forward to him continuing that progression trend into next season, playing with Shane Wright as a sophomore and having a better team. He could have an explosive post-draft season.
Okay, and I'll name my guy. It's Sam Colangelo. He plays for the Chicago Steel. While it is a stacked team, he's a power forward, and he's 6'2". I think he should go somewhere in the second and third round also. His nickname is Score a Goal, Sam Score a Goal. I think it's pretty funny. He had 28 goals this year, made a really nice entry-level year, really worked on his shot. He is a work ethic guy too. There's no question about it, and he'll take a hit to make a play. So he is that kind of guy. So people could look out for him. And Eck, I guess you have a question from the chat.
The chat room had a question here, which I thought was a interesting one. And I know this is a ways off, but Matt Gaffney asks Russ or Peter, is Shane Wright the real deal? It seems people think he is the McDavid level in terms of generational talent.
Yes, is the short answer.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he comes into the OHL as a 15-year-old, and he's dominating games.
Yeah,
on a terrible team almost.
Yeah, I've spoken to his agent, and should be getting an interview at some point. And yeah, I've been very impressed. I knew about him last year when he was getting the exceptional status. So I've kept an eye on him.
Yeah,
he's the real deal. He is.
Yeah. He skates exceptionally well for a player his age. His offensive skills are evident even at his age, but like he's just so smart away from the puck. He's responsible defensively. He back checks hard. He skates back hard. Like he puts his head down and cuts some ice when the puck's going back into the Kingston zone. And he's very good in the defensive zone, getting in, in pass lanes and getting his stick in pass lanes. He creates a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'1", 183, and he's still going to grow. That's the feeling, is he will still grow a little bit.
Well, he's 2022 draft, right? He's a January birth date, so he's a couple years away.
He's a couple years away, and I feel like hasn't really gotten the Tavares sort of, press out of it. I remember when I went and saw Tavares and in Oshawa, and that was a big deal. I think next year, we'll probably get more headlines.
Sure. Kingston's like last, so
yeah.
There's that.
All right.
All right.
We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, Peter, we really thank you so much. Where can people find you online, and how can people follow you and such?
So I'm affiliated with Dauber Prospects.
Yep.
It's a fantasy focused site towards prospects, draft eligible and drafted players, and I host a podcast for them. It's called Dauber Prospects Radio.
Great.
Yeah, so on Twitter, at DPR_show is the Twitter handle for the show if you want to look it up. Great. And then if you want to follow me, it's Farling, PHARLING.
Great. I will tweet out and make sure as many people as possible do that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, Peter. Thank you for coming on, and please come on again in the future, and be safe wherever you are now, and hope your family's good.
I got all the time in the world these days, boys. Thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.
Everybody's saying, we can blow you off right now. It's interesting. You call people, they're like, oh, I'm really swamped. It's like, no one can do that. It's hilarious when you call people up. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Anytime.
Russ instead of Peter. All right. Peter Harling, guys, that was fun.
Yeah, Peter's fun. He's a good guy.
That was really good. That was really, really interesting.
I'm glad he mentioned Shane Wright too, because I'll be honest, I haven't mentioned him much on the show because I haven't gotten the interview yet. I kind of wanted to get that done, but since that's lagged a little bit, it was good to talk about it.
I want to be honest, like I've only heard of him a couple times, which is ridiculous, right? Because he is as level he's at.
15 years old.
I like, since you're here, Russ, I let you do that. Mike is a prospect guy too. Mike loves his prospects as well. So
I'm nowhere in the same venue as Russ, but I get intrigued by certain players and sort of like marinate on them. It's like I'll focus in on like 3 or 4 guys that I think really are really interesting, and then but I leave sort of the general stuff to Russ because he knows a lot more and he sees these guys where I look at them online and see their stats and read up on them and then get the impressions of other people about.
And I haven't seen live yet because it's not like Kingston was close to me where I was, but I'll eventually see him. He'll be by next year. He'll be like in the top prospects game and all that.
And it's funny, and I'll just use it, and I won't name the people that I talk to, but it's funny because obviously I'm focused on the Leafs, and when Nick Robertson, who was picked in the 2nd round last year, I asked around a few people that I respect, and they said, they were sort of nonplussed about him. Good skill, but he's for his size, he's not particularly fast.
They were that way at the draft too, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like right after the draft, I was asking a few people about him, and they said, he's got skill, but he's only 5'11" and 170 pounds, and and now you go a year later, and Chris Peters, who Russ and I know pretty well from ESPN, named Robertson the top prospect for the 2019-20 season. He led the OHL in goals. He has an outside chance of making the Leafs as a 19-year-old because he's too young to play in the American Hockey League. Stuff like that. It's like it's an inexact science. It's like people who know a ton can say, well, this guy I have problems with, and then all of a sudden and there's no guarantee he's going to be.
I'll tell you what part of the thing was, Mike, that I felt. Because he's Jason's brother and Jason's 6'2", 200, right. I think they were sort of treating him, not all people, but some, even at the draft, like he was the runt of the litter. So
I was going to use that same expression. Yeah, exactly. But he's a different style type of player.
Oh, he's totally different than Jason. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's but it'll be really interesting. I wonder how much this draft will be affected by the fact that, and I'm not saying it's going to have a significant chilling effect, but some teams invest in their overseas prospect evaluation of their scouts, and there are a number of Swedes and Germans and a Russian goaltender in this draft.
Oh no, there's a ton of Swedes for sure.
Right, and I wonder how the fact that they're not going to get another 1 or 2 looks at these players or talk to them at the combine, how much that's going to affect their
factor. I mean, so Sweden's a country in trouble right now with this virus. I mean, I feel like we've been reading, but they decided that they weren't going to do social distancing. They're the one country that really, they're one country of that magnitude, of that population, that just said, we're going to just tell people to be careful. And so their businesses are open, schools are open, everything's open, and their thing is not plateauing. Their graph is not plateauing because of it. And it's so Sweden. It's just that's going to play into it too. There's no question that kind of stuff.
Here's what I think. Normally, when you look at OHL guys as an example, right? OHL, WHL, those guys, right? Junior hockey guys. There is a short leash after you sign them that by the time they're 20, you have to give them their entry level or you're going to lose them, right?
Yeah.
And now you've sort of lost 15% of a season, including playoffs of that.
True.
It could make a decision where a team says, I don't know if he's going to develop enough by the time he's 20 that I'm going to be wanting to sign him. But if I get that kid in Sweden or that college prospect, I could stash him a little longer, and I don't have to put him under a contract that counts against my 50.
Yeah,
and
4 years. You can write 4 years.
You get 4. You don't get 4 with OHL kids.
Right. Exactly.
As an example. And so that where it could make a difference. It won't make a difference. It's always like this in anything else, right? It won't make the difference on the first round guys.
Right.
It could make a difference 2nd to 7th, though. And I do think we'll see it like last year, more overagers. I think we're going to see more overagers again because, again, you could sign them, put them in the AHL, and hope for some quicker development. And I do think you will see more Swedes and guys like that. I mean, we saw a number of them, I want to say 5th through 7th, the last couple of years. A lot of teams have been loading up on them. Like, as an example, I'll give you a kid who, let's see if I can look up, it's hard to spell his name, from the Rangers, Pachiniemi, and I liked the pick at the time, and I felt like they were basically stocking him. I'll get a thing on him in a minute, stats, but those are the kinds of guys where I think, you know what? Yeah. I think teams are going to do that. I think that will change how the draft is a little bit.
Well, I mean, and Toronto has done that the last few years, Russ. I mean, go back to 2014, they took Andreas Janssen, who is now a pretty good top 9 forward for them. They took him in the 7th round. He was the SHL Rookie of the Year. He stayed over there, I think, 3 seasons, came over, played 2 years in the AHL, and then makes the Leafs. Pierre Engvall is another 7th round pick. They've been like late in the draft going with because they have a good scout in Sweden that they trust, and it's paid off for them. So I mean, I think teams, like the Leafs and like the Rangers and other teams are probably going to go down that road because they don't have to make a decision on these players after 2 years. Like players they take in the CHL, they go right back in the draft.
Right. So here's an example. So Pachiniemi, who's a Finn, sometimes I get him confused. I'm bad that way. Plays for Liga, 49 games, 40 points.
Wow.
Got him in the 5th round.
And he's an 18-year-old.
No, he's 20.
He's 20. Okay.
So that's the other thing. It's like, so you figure they give him another year there. He's 21. They give him a year in Hartford. He's 22. Maybe they wait till 23, or maybe he gets up in that 22-year season for the NHL, which is the average. That is the average age of a hockey player, is really 22, not like 18, 19, 20, where we're seeing some of the phenoms get in.
Now, Russ, I know that you wanted to say something for pre-show, but we had Peter right off the bat, so you wanted to talk about some.
Yeah, this affects what we'll pretend that the WWE is a regular sport right now, and so they got named to Trump's council for reopening the economy. Right, that was yesterday. On the same day, Vince McMahon cut a lot of talent, which they do that frequently, but not at these times, not the way it was done here, and furloughed a lot of regular employees, guys like a guy named Fit Finley, who used to be a wrestler but has been training everybody for the last 20 years. He's gone. They dug deep. They took out some big stars like Kurt Angle, even though he's a little older, and a guy named Rusev. He's been a big star. They took out some of those too, apparently saving from one guy reported, about $4 million in salaries. Now, this is after he was given special dispensation to keep operating. So my big thing here is, and this is why I was only marginally mad at the NHL not the NHL, some teams getting rid of some people and giving them 20% pay cuts, but at least they were keeping them. This is an organization that has been allowed to operate, but because he invested poorly in the XFL and that went belly up because of it wasn't a good league anyhow, but the virus didn't help it. That went belly up. So he probably looked at his bottom line and said, I've got to save money. And he did it this way. And how do you put a guy like that on a council? And in sports, here's another one. So in baseball, Governor Cuomo was talking to Jeff Wilpon, who runs the Mets. And he said, we would love to have, the Mets start up at some point, and this would be great. Yeah. And Wilpon said, sure, that would be great if the salaries, if the players could take a salary cut. And again,
and he didn't save a penny there, Jeff.
These guys don't get it. It's like they're basically asking you to start up your sport to help the country, and their first thought is, well, I've got to make it worth my while or I might not do it. Well, and this is the problem right now with sports and this in this climate.
Well, yeah. I'll give NHL owners some credit that they haven't made any decisions on executives, like general managers. Like, for example, we know what happened in Buffalo with Chris Bandura and a few other people in the stable organization, the PR and operations, but they haven't made any kind of move on Jason Botwell because the season isn't over yet. But
I talked to somebody else about them. I know you guys talked about it before I was on the show yesterday. But the Pegula situation, like that, I talked to people about that, and a lot of people are getting laid off now, with the thought of going on unemployment and being rehired, right? That's a big thing that's happening. So you have to be, it's interesting. Obviously I know lots of people. My sister's in that boat. My sister got laid off from her company. She works as a dentist, but the idea is, we're going to lay you off because we're not making any money now. You can collect unemployment when we open up again, you'll be rehired. I don't know how much of that is happening. Unfortunately, that you're going to get rehired, but
Well, I'm going to give you something. It's funny that you said dentist. My dentist, which is not local, I shouldn't, because I go to Cherry Hill for a dentist. My dentist couldn't reopen because they couldn't get any masks.
Oh yeah, no, the dentist is closed. I mean, my sister works. They're the same reason. They're closed.
Oh, just think about that. It's not because they can't operate in these times. It's because they can't get supplies.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
I'm hoping that that's the case, Zach, as you're saying, but NHL owners really haven't, in general, gone down the road of a team like the Chicago Bulls, who fired their vice president of basketball operations and their GM in the middle of all this.
No, I mean, that's insane.
It isn't even over with, and they fired them.
Right.
That's insane. But I do think that sometimes with these firings of these, you have to realize that there is this other concept out there that, and it's playing the system, basically. It's what it is. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Look, for the GMs, that guy makes a lot of money, right? For the average WWE wrestler, unless you were a big star, that money's going to run out quick for them because there's not that many other jobs to begin with. Nobody else is open. So when you're cutting these people, you're basically just throwing them out there and adding to the unemployment numbers. And I don't want to see sports do that. So as an example, I don't want hockey to come back if they're going to cut 30% of the players, if they say, because I do feel like there's a point where it's not worth it for them to come back.
I agree. That's definitely the case. There is a point.
Well, it's funny because Mitch Marner was interviewed he had a conference call on Tuesday, and we were talking about the whole Drew Doughty commentary about he doesn't really want to come back for the season because they're out of it. They're not going to make the playoffs, and if they come back for 4 regular season games or 10 regular season games, what's the point? I believe it was right.
You're gonna take your money and pay for what those tickets would cost. Go ahead.
Oh, right, but Todd McClellan was asked whether, because Doughty it felt that way, whether they would just sit out guys like Doughty and Kopitar for the rest of the regular season if they came back, and he said, "Well, no." So these guys have to play. Well, Marner's basically said, whatever it takes, we want to play. We want to. Now that's the point of view of somebody who has a chance to go to the playoffs. To me, it's that mentality. There is no chance of the Kings making the playoffs. So Doughty's looking at this like, why should I bother coming back now? Why shouldn't I just wait until next season?
Well, and there's a risk. There is a risk for your health. And that's where, a player is probably weighing that. Like, again, yeah, if you're playing for Ottawa, do you want to risk your health when you know you're not playing for the Stanley Cup? Like, they're not. No matter what they do, they're not playing for the Stanley Cup.
Right.
So is it worth risking your health? And I think when things get close and they start coming out with dates and everything, I think we're going to start hearing those kinds of comments. I think right now they're being held back from players and such because it's just too far away. It's not worth it for them to say anything yet.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get mad at players if they say that because they're human.
Right.
Like, I just posted a story. It's a little bit chilling because in March there was a bunch of people in a home, elderly people, who used to play poker every day or every week, I should say. They'd have their weekly poker game, and 3 people out of 7 died from that weekly poker game because when they started to have a problem in Florida didn't treat it seriously, as you all know. And so the people there didn't treat it as seriously as they probably felt it should have. And that poker game turned out to be the cause for some deaths. And it's, those kinds of things that, players are thinking about, that their families are thinking about it. Like, as an example, we had used the WWE, and Roman Reigns was a guy that had leukemia. So he said, I can't come back. He didn't come back for WrestleMania. And now they just said that his wife just gave birth to twins. And so that's another reason why he probably didn't want to come back, because he wanted to be with his kids, didn't want to affect his family, didn't want to affect his health. So there's a lot to this. People, the human life, we all look at them just as players and they should all just play and that's it. But there's other factors.
Oh, there's a ton of factors. And so this thing Matthew Gaffney put up there, and I heard about this too. This is something that actually has been going around in the NHL a little bit the last week or so. Kevin Hayes said in an interview with Barstool Sports that he thinks July 15th is a realistic date to return. That is a date that I've heard players mention for whatever it's worth. I do hear that out there. I think it's more like a rumor that's been just kind of circulating.
I think they all look at it and say it seems right.
Someone said that, and that's not an informed thing that he's saying there. It's more or less, everybody's saying it. A couple people say it, and then it sounds like, hey, that makes some sense because it's far enough out that it's definitely okay, by then we should be going. But and I think that is possible. That, I said July 1st, based on the one scenario, but they, what I was told again is they can start on July 1st or September 1st and still get the season in the playoffs in, which is, I know everybody thinks is nuts, but as long as they finish by
at this point,
that's the whole goal is by New Year's Eve to have the Stanley Cup crowned. And if they start September 1st, that they can get that in still. So that's what they're saying.
Sure. Is that possible? Yes.
Yeah.
Are we talking about with fans?
Yeah, we are.
So this is where I'm going to tell you where the pressure is going to lie. And this is all sports. There is going to be pressure from the political side. And you saw it with Cuomo already asking the Mets, who's going to be the first sport to come back?
Yeah.
Somebody is going to have to come back and play to empty stands, whether it's baseball, hockey, or basketball. That's the only way they're going to get to be the first to come back and see if they could operate. I can tell you that baseball is taking the players are testing their antibodies.
Yeah.
So they're doing that. I'm surprised the NHL didn't jump in on that. Baseball is the first to do it.
But those getting those tests are not the easiest thing in the world. I mean, and that's something.
No, but this is just testing their antibodies. This isn't
antibody tests or not. I mean, the antibody tests were there is a theory out there that we're all going to have to take those antibody tests
right
over the next couple of months,
right,
to see if we've been because many of us may have had it and not seen anything from it,
right.
So then you would know that you build up the immunity. But so it's possible that way too. That antibody test is going to be vital.
But there's a lot more players in baseball than hockey. That's why I'm surprised hockey didn't want to do it or try and do it.
I feel that is because baseball is further fans than hockey is. I think hockey is willing to wait a little bit longer and return with fans.
Yeah, baseball's trying to get the jump on things because they have
that's what it is.
They have the longer season that they have to play, so they want to get started by, say, Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Not wait till July and have an 80-game season. That's not going to help them. They want at least 100 games probably with the structure that came out a couple weeks ago with the redone divisions and DHs for all the teams. So But I see. I think it's. I really think it's realistic. I don't know about with fans, but I think the middle of July, getting your playoffs done probably by the end of September, having a month off for the draft and awards and free agency, and then starting again in say the 1st of November, skipping the All-Star game and skipping the bye week. What I think is going to be interesting is the chilling effect that it's going to have on free agency. Guys like Alex Pietrangelo probably, going to go out and try to hit the grand slam home run on a free agent deal. He might take a 1-year deal from St. Louis. Just
a lot of that's what I've heard, that agents are already telling players who are going to be UFAs to expect 1-year deals. Actually, that's something.
Yeah, it wouldn't at this point. It wouldn't shock me. I
mean, it's like they feel as if there's so much out there that's like uncertain that the 1-year deal. Now, the problem with the 1-year deal though is what? Think about it for a second. It's Seattle, right?
It's a roll. Right. Well, yeah.
It's Seattle, because then you end up with a lot of guys, who
could be available for that.
Yeah, it could be available for that.
Yeah, the Seattle ownership could sign a bunch of unrestricted free agents because they have, $80 million in cap space.
About all that cap space, and if those, if you make every free agent that's like a free agent this year, if you just push them 1 year, so you have that many more free agents next year, then you suddenly have a really interesting thing for Seattle.
But if you think of it from the other team, from say St. Louis's perspective, they don't have to protect Pietrangelo because he's a UFA.
True.
Right.
So
he can still make his own choice.
Right. They can protect Parayko and Falk and another defenseman, and they don't have to protect Pietrangelo, and then maybe they can get him re-signed or not. If they don't, then he could go to Seattle or go someplace else, but it gives them options.
I can tell you yesterday doing this Stick to Hockey podcast, we had Craig Berube and Keith Jones on, and both of them really did feel like they're going to get back at it. And Berube, obviously, for obvious reasons, really wants to get back at it because he really wants to have a chance to repeat. And so they were both pretty confident that was going to happen. I think you're right, Mike, as far as the antibody testing. I think baseball does want to sort of be fast on that. But also the other problem is, and this is something where I saw yesterday, like there's a new fast test that is available now, but each state only got like 115 of them.
Yeah, that's
yeah. I mean,
that's going to take another month or two, it seems.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that we're not like that we haven't taken every frigging place that's free right now, every manufacturing facility, and aren't making these tests right now at rates where we can all be tested within the next month is insane.
Well, but let's get this straight, because professional sports are big money. These players are going to get preferential treatment, whether it means that that major league teams are going to get these fast test machines, or they're going to get preferential treatment in terms of getting tested because I mean, they could all be marked essential like the WWE was. So, is there going to be some sort of PR hit because they're getting preferential treatment over normal people? Well, they get preferential treatment because they make millions of dollars.
I think there will be a PR hit. I do think there's because there's a lot of. I mean, that is the growing bubble that's like under the surface right now in America, is the fact that you can't get tested. That's like something that is absolutely, and it's going to just get worse the longer that continues.
And and this is happening in New York State and in California right now, and there's going to be a growing resentment about this too. New York State, everything is being like they just extended it to the self quarantine to May the 15th. Everybody in New York is being treated the same as if they're right next to New York City, where the rates of the hotspot are ridiculous, whereas Central New York and Western New York are nowhere close to that, but we're getting shut down just like New York City. Whereas in California, LA County has levels close to New York City, and the rest of California is being shut down. They have to adjust this according to the areas and not keep it even for the entire state, because the entire state is not being affected.
I do want to mention this too. Yesterday, a story really backfired on a football reporter, Jay Glazer, because he kind of kept people hanging, saying, "Hey, I've got big news, and it's going to come tonight." And then there was this talk middle of the day, like a big player, this Odell Beckham Jr. He's a big guy, may go get traded at the draft, right? And he's like, "No, it's not that. It's something else." And then it turns out that he announced who the first player with COVID-19 for the NFL is, which we all knew was going to come. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more names because they have the biggest rosters. Sure. And they've been strangely silent through this whole thing, because you would think leading up to the draft, we would have gotten more information about it. But so he announced the first one, and he really took a hit because people were not happy about that. Because again, you should never, in this era right now, with the way we are, you shouldn't tease out anything like that, because
that's awful.
Well,
people just are not up for it.
No one's in that. I mean, and also, I mean, of course, the NFL was not playing at the time, right? That it all happened, and the NFL players were.
But the draft is coming, so they, the
players were very much dispersed throughout the country, right? So like it's like that. So you have a lot of people in, which is fortunate, because like some people, a lot of people in less populated areas.
Heck, they're having virtual mini camps. They're not even congregating for that. They're doing mini camps over the computer.
Yeah.
Now, because we're coming up on it here, just to finish off, and I want to ask Kevin about this tomorrow, because I remember back earlier at the start of the season, he wrote about this. Our KHL correspondent, Davis Kelnins, reported about Slava Voinov attempting to make another, now that they knocked his suspension down from a full season. I think there was an arbitrator knocked it down to 41 games. And that on July 1st or whenever free agency starts, he wants to try to come back to the NHL. Now, the thing is with Voinov, which I think would have a chilling effect, if he was an unrestricted free agent, I think there would be a team out there that would roll the dice. It's going to be a big PR hit, but I think there would be a team that would say, I'll give him a 1-year deal, league minimum, and since it doesn't cost us a ton, it'll cost us in terms of the heat we're going to have to take, but we'll give him a chance to see if he can still play in the NHL. But LA still owns his rights, so a team would have to trade for him and give up probably a draft pick to get him and then sign him. And I don't think anybody's going to be willing to give up even a 4th or 5th round pick for a guy who's 30 years old, who might not be able to play. And if he can play, they have to deal with the fact that he was charged with a felony and had to flee to the KHL. So
he's going to have to play for the minimum, and I still think teams would balk at that.
Yeah, I think that it's in normal times. I was totally there, Russ, but I'm not so sure that a team might not try to sneak it in right now.
Right.
I don't
know. I think this is a bad time to sneak it in, because
I think it would be a disaster, and for sure people on the internet would not allow it to happen, but it wouldn't be as big as right now. You can definitely get away with something easier than you could otherwise.
Sure, I agree with you on that.
So they're going to take a hit, but how big the hit is might be minimized a little bit by what's going on now. I haven't seen how he's actually played.
He played really well last year. He switched from SKA St. Petersburg to Ulm, and he had a really good year. And you got to remember, he's a right-handed defenseman who won a Stanley.
No, I know, and he's got like someone said, like Randy in the chat said, the Oilers would be a great fit. Obviously that is the perfect fit for the Oilers. If not, and if take everything out, that a right-handed defenseman who won a Stanley Cup who can play, of course.
The Leafs would be a good fit too.
And I do
want to mention this because you asked the question, Ek. Now that we're close to the NFL draft, it looks like the pandemic is going to affect guys who are going to be drafted, because there are certain guys from certain parts of the country that didn't get seen a lot. A lot of their pro days were canceled. The on-site visits were canceled. There's a thing called the HBCU Combine. And so these are players that I think are coming out of the Carolinas and places like that. And they said there may only be one drafted out of there, simply because it's going to be a big guessing game for them otherwise. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see some changes at the draft. I don't see how there's not going to be.
And you know what? I know for because I'm in Buffalo, and I've heard from other reporters that the Bills traded their 1st round pick before all this stuff hit. And this is not a bad draft to have traded your 1st round pick with all the uncertainty. I wonder whether that's going to be the case in the NHL. Not to say you're going to trade it for nothing, but whether teams will opt for the surefire, if they get a player who they think can help them immediately for a 1st round pick, when they may not feel comfortable with having a pick in the middle or late 1st round that they haven't had a chance to scout. I
don't think anybody will trade a top 15. Those guys are known.
Right.
They're very well known. I think, you might you might see a trade or two below that, but I don't think top 15 you will.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So, I mean, this HBCU looks like it affects some of the teams in Florida. We have to remember there's a lot of collegiate teams, a lot more than hockey teams.
Well, a lot of these players didn't get a chance to take their Wonderlic test, which we always laugh at, Russ. So
that's true.
That you should be able to take. I mean, that
should be online.
I mean, that should be. There's no reason these players shouldn't be taking that.
It's funny because I saw a report yesterday, and I know, Aki, you've got a daughter who's going into college.
Yeah.
There are kids who are seniors right now that could not take the ACT and the SAT tests, and colleges are waiving those tests for the first time to allow the kids to go into school without them.
Well, honestly, those tests are fraud anyway. But
I only took it once.
There's been a trend in colleges. Like a couple big universities in the last few years have just said that to screw the ACTs and the SATs are just big money making.
I refused to take it a second time. I took
money making scams is what they are, and they're ridiculous. I mean, they are like crazy. Yeah. There's such a. I mean, I could go off on that.
I mean, I did really well in English. I did okay in math. My score was like mid-range to good, and I was like, "That's good enough for me. I'm not doing another one."
Yeah, I mean, I only did it once. I did really well in it, but to me, it's like But what's happening now that's like crazy is that all the like grades are so much higher than they were when we were there because of all the coaching and training that goes into it beforehand. Mm-hmm. If you can't afford to pay somebody like $1,500 to train your kid to take the SATs,
those tutors rake it in, man.
Oh, they're crazy, and there's serious money there. And
what are they, like $40 an hour?
It's around $1,000 on the cheap side. Okay, to pay.
Probably cheaper to buy the answers somewhere.
No, but yeah, it might be. But to like, and and it was weird because
when I went to college, $1,500 I think was the cost of my first year's enrollment in community college.
I know.
In total.
I know that so you look at this and what it is like. I went through this with my daughter, and you call up a company and first of all I'm like, we're not doing that. That's ridiculous. My daughter she's a 4.0. She's honors. She's already taken all these AP courses. She's like one of the tops in her class. Like, why are we gonna drink? Why? And my wife's like, well, everybody else is getting these tutors, and she's gonna be behind. And I'm like, holy cow, this is just insane. I mean, what about the people who can't afford this at all, right? So we call up the tutor, and how it works is they have like 4 different tutors, and they'll say to you, well, we have this guy, and like he's like amazing, and he's like, right. And then there's this guy who's like 1,000, and then if you want like John, who just kind of started last week, he's like 700. So like basically say, okay, I don't want to be I want to be tutored, but not really well. Is that what you're telling me? Like you're gonna like right? I had the biggest fight with this guy on the phone who was like trying to sell me this thing. I'm like, so yeah, I want who do you want? I was like, I want the best guy, obviously,
for the least amount of money.
He's the most money. Okay, so you can get a less guy.
Well, all I know is
and I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is insane. Like, how is this allowed to happen?
That is crazy.
I went to an excellent 4-year college in the Buffalo area, a member of the SUNY system, and
I was a member of the SUNY system too.
SUNY system's hard to get into nowadays.
The first 3 years, my tuition per semester was $732.50. I always thought the 50 cents being added, but that was what it was.
That's what I'm saying. I think I spent $1,000.
My daughter's is going to be like $60,000 a year or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely and that is with her getting some money for being such a good student. That's like getting money. It's like it's
you're still getting a grant or something, and that's still the cost.
And you're still getting that, yeah.
Wow.
And there's a whole negotiation going on because one school offered her more money than this other school that she really wants to go to. So I have to call up that school and say, well, this other school, she wants to come to your school, but this other school offered her like $20,000 more a year than you did. Oh, it's like insane. It's just be thankful that neither of you have children in this situation because it's like
I'm thankful about that every day.
David Poyle made a really good quote here.
By far the worst part of having a child.
Here's a quote from David Poyle. Brooks Bratton posted it. Poyle said, we need to get our arms around the fact that if the NHL is to return this season, it will likely be in empty buildings and possibly neutral sites. Adds the most ideal situation is to play the regular season games, but could go straight to the playoffs. So, see, I think they are going to have to give up on fans at some point.
They might. They really might. They really might. I think that is possible.
Poyle is usually a leader with this kind of stuff. I give him credit.
Yeah, he's smart for sure, and
Yeah.
I think that, but I wouldn't say he's super connected at the top with the NHL. Like Nashville has kind of their own. They're kind of Will and everybody's sort of on an island a little bit. Craig Leopold, when he was there, was really connected with the NHL.
Yeah.
Would have been different, but yeah, I don't like Leopold and Bettman were tight. So I don't know. They what I think is going to surprise people, and this is just my feeling based on talking to people, is they will wait as long as they can to possibly get fans in there. And
yeah, I could see that.
as opposed to jumping on like earlier without fans.
Right.
Whether that's right or wrong, and I do think they're willing to sacrifice until January.
Ideally, they want fans in the stands, but I think the realization, especially after what Dr. Fauci said yesterday, is that it's probably going to have to be without fans. The precedence is getting the season done.
Here's my big issue. I know we're running over, but screw it. I don't care. I'm going to be like Jim Valvano and just say,
time doesn't really exist anymore, Russ.
I know, but no, I want to say like this. I don't want to see the NHL lag behind because they're waiting to have fans come in the stands.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: I don't think is really being looked at. Even though they are going to lose X amount of revenue, when they start up, whoever that first league to start up is, they are going to get tremendous ratings because there's so many people at home. They will watch it even if they're not the biggest fans. There's going to be advertising money to be made that could possibly cut the losses really well, but it's not going to be every sport, right? So the first one back, they will probably be able to rake in the lion's share of advertising. And
Bettman has always been about that kind of thing. I mean, there's a reason the NHL is the first major sports franchise to have that team.
Right. So you've got to weigh that in my mind and figure out, because look, there's certain businesses that are making out here. I'm sure a company like Purell will still advertise. Food companies are going to still advertise. There's some companies doing really, really well. If you could get locked in with some of those on some big ad contracts, that might suffice.
Yeah, it could.
Just
it's a great
guy sitting here in New Jersey.
No, it's a great point, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know. If I was to predict who's going to be the first back, it would be baseball.
Yes.
And even though that they have the longest.
Now, are you going to watch a baseball game if they come back?
I watch baseball games now, guys. I mean, it's not like, listen, I mean,
I know you do, but are you going to pay attention now?
Yeah, sure. No, definitely. I would. You're right. And I would definitely, I would anything, man. I'm not like at the point yet where, I mean, the other day, we found.
No, I believe in Mike. Mike has the non-believer face. I believe Eck.
I'm just smiling.
Yesterday, we found the channel that has women's beach volleyball. That was good for several hours.
I watch it all the time.
I mean, that's a sport that should be utilized right now more. I mean, there's other things. And did you see? I don't know if you saw the Stephen Colbert thing at ESPN. The ESPN morning thing was really funny.
Oh, I missed that.
The top of the Colbert thing was ESPN, and it was like basically the concept of what are we going to show on ESPN, right? And they had just some crazy like sports, like a lot of dog shows, and then they had like old man hide and seek was a sport, and there's all kinds of things that they just went off, and it was really funny.
I make it a practice to miss everything that has to do with Stephen Colbert, but anyway.
Which is why
you're missing out, Mike.
You're missing out. He's one of the smartest people on the planet. He's a really brilliant guy.
He is.
And
you make a good point. But I like I said, I think what I would be doing, again, this is me. It's easy for me to say. You've had all this time, right, as a league to not operate.
Yeah.
What they could do or could have done or maybe doing is changing the way you could get fans to interact with advertising. We don't have interactive advertising right now with TVs that could have it. And you could do buy-ins and such, like as an example. Let's say we're watching a hockey game and they say, hey, you know what? Fanatics is having a 25% sale now. Yeah. After the first goal, you can do it, and you can do it for the end of that period, but you have to hit the Y button on your remote.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's
that seems like a no-brainer, right?
No, have I mean, have you seen like things like FanDuel, which are struggling, obviously?
And they can do it with the Game Center. That's the easiest way to do it.
These things like FanDuel just need the sports back in the worst possible way. They're the ones out there, and they're I mean, FanDuel right now, it's funny. Now you can play like blackjack and roulette on FanDuel. I heard something. It's kind of
because that's all they got. Like, remember I was saying yesterday they were doing things like ping pong and Belarusian soccer. So they're looking for anything.
Oh yeah. No, it's pretty crazy. But we'll And what I'm really surprised, the NHL needs, and I told somebody at the NHL this, I'm like, you've got guys like Austin Matthews and other guys out there like Peter Angelo and different players who love to play Xbox NHL games. It's like how you're not having like, I mean, everybody's, I'm simulating games, other people are simulating different kinds of games. How you don't have these players playing in a league that's like televised on NHL.com and NHL Game Center is beyond me. Like that they're not
they would do it for free. They wouldn't care.
They're doing it already. There's tons of players out there that are playing against each other online.
Matthews and Marner, the Leafs posted a video of Matthews and Marner and a professional game player playing the Leafs versus, I think it was the Canes or something like that on their Twitter feed yesterday.
Oh yeah, and that needs to be like that kind of thing. They need to organize it. You know what I mean? They really, if that was organized at all, because you could find players for if you could find 5 players, because you can play 5-on-5 online.
Yeah.
Online. So you could have like 5 guys from the Flyers, 5 guys from the Maple Leafs playing against each other.
Yeah.
And then stream it on Twitch with all the commentary going back and forth that you'd hear, that you would have huge ratings. If people would absolutely love it.
I'm sure if you let Doc Emmer call a little bit of it, it would help.
Yeah, I'm getting big ratings for showing these videos on Twitch.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just streaming, old. I mean, if you had players and commenting and on everything, oh man, there is such. That's. I'm really surprised that those kind of.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we're pretty honest on this show, I think, and I do think the NHL is missing out on some opportunities while they're waiting for things to happen. Like, here's the worst thing. To me, I've always been taught this. It's bad to wait around for things to happen.
Yeah.
It is. If you're waiting for things to happen, it's probably not going to happen for you. You know what I mean? Like, you ever get?
I live by the motto, like, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. Like, that's like bottom line. Standing still is not an option. Standing still, like.
Mike's telling us we have to end, Ek.
Yeah. But and I'm saying, like in my world, of trying and all of us trying to keep competitive hockey websites going or whatever. I mean, I've got a lead on people, and I got a good I did pretty well. But if you don't get if you don't,
Mike.
What did Mike say?
Oh, Mike texted us that we have to get we have to end it, or it's going to be bad consequences.
No, we can't. The show after a certain amount of time, we can't upload it.
Right, I understand. Let's go. Well, Mike, you'd have to edit it, which would take a good 5 minutes to do. So don't worry about it.
Okay.
I know you got nothing else to do. I'm just joking. You do a hell of a job, Mike. If you don't do it, I'd be doing it, and that would suck. So I appreciate it very, very much. Folks, if you like what we're doing here, go to patreon.com/hockey. And like I said, I didn't do predictions today. Travel back in time. I have a thought that I want to bounce off my fellow guys that maybe starting tomorrow, I'll give these guys each the special thing, and we might travel back in time to one game and report on it. Okay. Not just me. Because it's a lot of work for me to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we'll see how that plays out. We might get Kevin to travel back in time tomorrow and give a report on a game. But if you like that, remember NHL.com/hockey, $5 a month or whatever you can give.
Patreon.com/hockey.
What did I say?
You said NHL.com/hockey.
Yeah,
NHL doesn't need your money. We do.
No.
.com/hockey. They're richer than God. All right, go to patreon.com/hockey. That is Hockey Buzz's way. That's your way to support us. And go and right now, if you want to become a free season ticket holder next year, on my website, I have a little contest going that we'll talk about tomorrow, which are the greatest playoff series of all time. Get your 2 cents in. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Because we are 1 year ago today, the Columbus Blue Jackets defeated the Tampa Lightning in 4 games. And that was a hell of a series. So anyway, that's all you have. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.